Our topic is rethinking site overheads in a Swedish context. To do this, we looked at allmänna kostnader with Housing Department 1 of Skanska. Currently today, allmänna kostnader are costs that cannot be attributed to any specific work. And we looked at this to try and find out how Skanska could become more competitive by lowering their allmänna kostnader. And this process was achieved by coming up with 4 research questions, trying to answer them. The first was, how can R-core be, or how is R-core defined in both literature and by Skanska? The second one was, how can it be categorized? Thirdly, as a tool for efficiency, are there rooms for improvement? And fourth was, what current tools and methods are there for handling R-core today? We did this by conducting a literature review, empirical study, and an analysis. The literature review focused on 3 main areas, which were the Swedish market, to try and find out why it was important to consider. Allmänna kostnader, which are also site overheads or site preliminaries based on the country, UK, US, Sweden, etc. And thirdly, the index adjustments and activity-based costing as tools and methods for handling R-core. Then the empirical study was conducted with 11 interviewees, mostly from Housing Department 1. We also did a questionnaire which was sent out to a wider audience with 49 respondents. Then these findings from both the literature and empirical study were compared by abductive reasoning, trying to match them, find out the similarities and differences, etc.
Let's say the main result is obviously hard to present them all here, but the main result was from the definition we had. Wanted to find a definition from the interviews, and what we found out, there was no cohesive definition amongst the employees at the company, even though we found from the first interview that definition already existed within the company, but no one of the interviewees mentioned that definition. And within that definition, there also were a list of resources that should always be considered to be R-core costs or site overheads, and resources that should never be considered R-core costs or site overheads. But we found out that interviewees viewed them very differently and allocated the costs very differently within the company, which then creates inconsistency for the estimators to make proper estimations for projects in the future, because the feedback data that they are provided doesn't hold any benefit for them. And with that, then we moved on to create a categorization of the resources to help the company to categorize the resources and see how they should allocate the cost. And then we made categories with subcategories, and also identify which categories we think maybe is the most important to consider in your project. For Skanska, I think the foremost definition, it becomes less ambiguous for them if they have a cohesive definition that they all can work in a more structured way. And the categorization we made it in form of a honeycomb diagram with all the categories, which makes it really easy to know what cost you should consider. And it also creates better structure for them in the future when they want to allocate the costs. It could also help with finding non-value adding activities on the site, since it more or less boils down to non-value activities. How efficient are you at the site with your resources? And you hopefully can provide a more standardized way of working with this for Skanska in the future, and also perhaps other companies can adopt this way of thinking, at least when they identify these costs. And hopefully we increase the competitiveness for the company as well, since they can't do much about the direct costs, since it's the same for everyone, but you're competing with the non-direct or the overhead costs, how efficient you are with the resources. So hopefully they can be more competitive in the outcome from this research.